But there in the last paragraph at the end of the book, it said, some new ideas are here needed. And so there I was. Some new ideas were needed. Okay, so I started to think of new ideas.
Well, I don't think there is any question about it. It can only be attributable to human error.
How does it help do that?
I don't know. I need to start my J-Day practice.
You're the reason this species is a failure, and it makes me angry.
This is Analytic Endeavors with Nick Thompson and Dr. Xander Mausoff. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again. Today we wanted to just talk about the current political climate, I think, real quick. Nothing super in-depth. We haven't done a ton of research into the various candidates. And
preface it with no research.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah,
no, I think it's
to be
good.
perfectly fair. But,
like...
I think gut reactions are still pretty fair because people who do zero research and people who do a ton of research each get one vote. So,
there you go, Nick. Yeah.
Just because somebody may know nothing about politics, but their vote is still just as valuable as somebody who knows a lot about it. So, that being said, I know nothing about it, so I'm going to talk about it now. I've been thinking about what people kind of ask, who's your candidate this time around? This is the 2020 election. Who's your candidate? And I don't really have a horse in this race at this point, to be perfectly honest. But the one person that I would vote for, either party, really no matter what their beliefs were, is if they were going to try to bridge the gap between the two sides. I don't care if that's a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, anything in between. If they want to actually try to involve both sides in a conversation, that is who I want to be president. And that's really about it for me. Xander, do you have a preference at this point in the process?
In the process of the current, so let's just kind of back up. This conversation's going to be mostly framed around the people running for president right now. Is that kind of where we're going with this?
I mean,
generally speaking,
I would honestly rather not talk about the individual people.
Okay, because we've been talking a lot about this kind of offline here. So I think that's kind of what inspired this kind of conversation here, is just to. I think there's some specific policies we want to talk about, but I guess, are we trying to talk about specific candidates, or what we would like to see in a candidate? Is that kind of where we're going?
Well, I think it's going to weave in and out no matter what, honestly, because we're in such a fractious political time right now. I don't think that we're going to be able to talk politics without bringing up people in the race right now. So maybe that's a pessimistic view, but I just feel like it's going to at some point be like, oh, just like Bernie, or oh, just like Trump. It's just going to happen at some point. So, I'd rather not discuss individual people very much on this one, but if a certain candidate has a belief that I like, then we'll bring it up, I guess. But I guess
back to that. You were kind of getting at what would I like to see in a candidate overall, number one thing.
Sure.
Okay, I mean, I feel like that's kind of the question.
Yeah, that is kind of
your lead off, because that's kind of what you were. I guess my top concern probably is the environment, and I don't see that. That's never an issue that's very important in the presidential race. It's talked about a little bit, but probably is my biggest concern. And then also just someone who is willing to look at data and look at results and look at where things are going and make decisions based on that. And I mean, originally I really liked I know we just said we might not talk about people, but I liked Andrew Yang because he seemed to be data driven. That was what always struck me. He was driven by the results he had seen and what he was looking far into the future based on those results. So yeah, I guess I would like to see someone who is practical. I think bridging the two sides, I think to me, you cut through and you bridge gaps by policies that are sensible in the term And I think being data driven and trying to look at things in that kind of framework will help with the divide. Now that's super optimistic, maybe totally unreasonable, but that and also just the environment. I just, that's an issue I think everyone should care about because we all live in the environment as far as I can tell. So
Yeah,
anyway,
some people consider themselves one issue voters, right? So it's like if your number one consideration is the environment, and a candidate doesn't meet your definition of exactly what you want him or her to say on the environment, like, is that a deal breaker? If a candidate's policies do not line up with yours on climate and maybe particularly with nuclear power, is that a deal breaker for you?
no, I think in 4 years ago in the primary in Florida, I voted for Bernie, and he is very against nuclear. And
Right.
I'm not sure if I would do that again, but yeah, I did. Even though he's against it and he's wrong about it, and he doesn't want to believe the data either. He's just as bad as the Republicans who don't believe that humans are causing some impact on the environment. He's just as bad in that respect. When it comes to the nuclear issue, he's just, he went on air and said, they closed a nuclear power plant in Vermont, and you saw carbon emissions go up 17%. He said that's not attributed to the nuclear power closure. And it's like every single person disagreed, everyone. So it's like, that kind of attitude's hard for me to stomach. But at the same time, I'd still, consider it. I'm not that one
issue voter.
One issue voter in that sense. But
gotcha.
So
yeah, I think it's hard to talk about politics without starting to bring up people and then equating people with ideas and then equating policies with those original ideas. Things get murky really quick, it seems like, to me anyway. You might start off with the best of intentions, but then you can get off track fairly easily sometimes. My thought would be on your kind of data-driven thing. That would be great if everyone in the country could be persuaded by data-driven
yeah. Oh yeah, no,
right?
it's totally. I just think on like the policy side, if you're, that's what I'd like to see. That I don't think it's going to convince anyone. It's sort of a losing battle to be in that way. But just what I'm. You just asked what I like. That's what I'd like, and
yeah,
I see people like Andrew Yang like looking really far forward. Now I don't 100% agree with his freedom dividend and that, but I think like looking forward and trying to extrapolate and trying to be proactive instead of reactive. That's probably my biggest thing. Is most of these issues are reacting to the current things that have been done 10, 20, 30 years ago, and then reacting to them now to try and fix them. Whereas typically, most people know being proactive usually is better. It's,
right. It seems like new safety guidelines are rarely thought up by various government agencies until somebody dies. So
right, exactly.
That's how we've been functioning really since the beginning. So unfortunately, that is a huge problem.
And I think we now have all this data and this information, like we have predictive capabilities. We should use them. We should use them. I'm also super biased because that's the kind of work that I try and do in my professional life, like trying to predict future events and recreate and things on a computer. So that's obviously, I'm a bit biased, but I can also see how stupid that also approach is because it doesn't even work all the time for the stuff we do. So,
anyway. I was going to say, if you had plugged in everything, if you had tried to control for all factors last election, I don't think that honestly many people thought that Trump was going to win the election, right? So, your models can be so.
People on the West Coast, people on the coast. You hang out in North Florida, hang out in Alabama, go to Southern Illinois. It wasn't as surprising in those places. I don't think. I think people got blindsided on those coasts.
Maybe not surprising. Maybe more. I don't know. I think if you put Donald Trump's sins on paper, Well, if you put anybody's sins on paper, anybody can be made to seem pretty unpalatable, right? I mean,
Right.
you know, Trump seems to have more of those sins than practically anybody that's run for office and succeeded.
He's
but
a pretty greasy guy, and then he pardoned that super greasy guy from Illinois. Anyway, that's just hilarious.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
Sorry,
we can get into
track here, but
executive branch and their pardons. Yeah, sometime. But yeah, it's.
I feel like I feel like you have a lot to say about a lot of different issues. I'm not sure if there's like one in particular you'd like to bring up.
Yeah.
I
guess
kind of focus on. We've talked a lot about healthcare offline because that's a current pretty big focus of the Democrats right now. I know there's a whole litany of kind of things that I feel like you've been kind of going in your head here. So
yeah, I think just to get back to my original point real quick of the whole whoever is going to try to bring people together, I think.
Yeah, so like, what does that mean to you? Like, what does that mean to you? I guess how does that work?
So that means that would mean that the data-driven people take the time to explain it to people who maybe would not normally be persuaded by data. If that doesn't work, then you can still. I think you're going to win more hearts and minds by being nice to the other side, even if they're wrong, than the other way around. Like if you dismiss them and say you're ignorant hicks or something, you catch more flies with honey than. Oops, but that doesn't make any sense, right? I don't think that's the right saying.
I don't think that's right. It's kind of a Rickyism.
Yeah, right, exactly. Jesus Christ.
Get two birds stoned at once,
Right. Okay, so we're gonna
but I see what you're saying.
Right. So I think somebody who could bring everybody along and make everybody feel like they're at least part of the conversation, even if we don't end up going like. You can, let's say you and a friend have a respectful disagreement on like single payer healthcare. Like you guys can both respectfully disagree, but if you do it respectfully, you have a better chance of changing that person's mind in the long run than if you called them dumb. And I guess you see that more on a larger scale on a lot of topics. It seems like increasingly the left just dismisses a lot of people on the right and maybe even in the center as being, you just don't understand it. You don't understand what the stakes are. I guess I'm really speaking to the single payer healthcare thing. It's difficult for me to say. It just seems like if you have any other opinion than we go to single payer tomorrow, then, you don't understand the stakes. You don't understand how life-threatening this is. You don't understand what needs to be done. And it's like, well, there has to be nuance to it. There's nuance to everything. This switching to a single-payer healthcare system in the United States would be the most disruptive thing we have ever done to our nation. It would be astounding the amount of change that would happen so quickly, and honestly it would tank the markets, I guarantee you, with all that uncertainty on how it was going to work. When we sorry to ramble a little bit, but when we passed Obamacare, it was like a 40,000 page document and people were given a day to read it or 12 hours or something. That's probably going to happen again, so it makes me really weary about going to a single payer healthcare system where we have a 300,000 page document that no one could ever truly understand, and then we have this law that's really hard to change, and then it starts wasting money, and then it just goes downhill from there. So maybe that's a pessimistic view, but I've seen that particularly in the VA, which is a government-run healthcare system that insures a ton of people. So that to me is one of the better examples of a large healthcare funded system.
So we're kind of veering back to a topic here. You were kind of starting off with how do we bridge people and stuff.
Right.
Do we kind of want to? I mean, I feel like you have a bunch more to say on the healthcare thing, and I have some thoughts on it too. I haven't.
I say we just bounce around and we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah. No, I mean,
You know,
I see what you're saying in terms of dismissing people, and that's definitely, it definitely happens. And I think it, anecdotally, it happens a little bit more on the left. But I talk to folks like, I have some friends, who are more conservative from like the central part of the United States, and I talk to them about drug addiction, and they have, from my perspective, no sympathy, no empathy about these situations. But at the same, like, they're kind of dismissive, but at the same time, to me, they also just don't have experience with it. So it's like, if you can, I think some of these people it's hard for them to project into their shoes. And like, I think if you talk to more of these people, you can start to project into like, how is it from their perspective? Like, do they know anyone who struggled with these issues? Do they know anyone, maybe they've been affected by the healthcare thing, or maybe they've been affected by the drug issue, or maybe they, and then from my perspective, personally, I've seen the healthcare system for me at a good, like with a good job and good healthcare and a health savings account works fantastic. Honestly,
Right,
like, that's the
right.
thing, right? It's like people like, it's broken. I was like, it's broken for, I agree. Like, for my mom, it's really
Oops.
and I see how expensive it is and how silly it is to get service. But like, for lots of people, it's like, for me, it's awesome.
Right.
Now. But like, can you project into, like, that's where, like, I see a lot of the issues, like, people can't project on the other side, like, and how do you get them to like talk, but if you're dismissive in this whole process, it doesn't work, and they don't want to put themselves in your shoes. That's kind of, it's very simple. It's just sort of human relations in some ways. Yeah.
It is. I think it's difficult for people to do, when you frequently bring up, people in their daily lives aren't thinking about these large, maybe concepts a lot of the time. And, I don't think that they are, maybe taking the time to try to empathize with people who, can't afford healthcare or can't afford very good healthcare. I personally am on the exchange right now, and just to tell you, for me, non-smoker, 28-year-old guy, pretty healthy. The cheapest I could find was about $300 a month deductible with premium. Sorry, $300 a month premium
With a high deductible.
$8,500 deductible,
yeah, which is crazy high.
12 grand max out of pocket. Yeah. So
that's like,
if I got hit by a truck,
right, that's what it would cover.
It would save me money. But other than that, it pretty much not. So yeah, I mean, and then I see people who have good, I've had good healthcare through jobs too, and I think that there is value to people working for that. I think that it is. I think that it's good for people to work for it, and it's good for people to have that as a magnet for jobs. I also think that there's a lot of room for a more subsidized option for lower income people, for elderly people, for disabled people. I'm not heartless. I definitely want there to be medical care for everybody, and I think that there could be. This gets back to another one of my points. Because you can't just talk about one thing and not talk about another, but if we started trimming budgets where they could be trimmed, we'd have more than enough money to give people like European style healthcare, where it's really fully government paid basically, but we could have shorter wait times, I think, because we would have so much money for it. So yeah, that's
I mean, I see what you're saying there. I've a couple thoughts on this, and these aren't very well researched or maybe totally fleshed out, but the things I don't like.
We had that disclaimer.
We already had that disclaimer. Just all right. We got that out of the way early. That's good. That I mean, the things that trouble me is okay. There's like two things I want to talk about: the profit motivation in healthcare, and then also the changing process, which you talked about. I think that so part of the penalty in the U.S. that we pay for having elected officials and a lot of freedom is it is harder to make these abrupt changes. You see places where they have more directed economies, Singapore, China, they have people, it's more authoritarian. They can direct the economy. You guys are doing this. We have the power.
Right.
If you don't agree, you're out of luck. Like, go,
Right.
you guys,
You can
like,
be arrested
this is happening. This is happening. This is the way. I think this is the trade-off we face. This is sort of the concern with these abrupt changes for me. Now, I think the argument people make is, well, rip off the Band-Aid, right? Like, just get it over with. It'll be better in the long term. And maybe that is true. I just think that isn't how our political system is necessarily set up. It shouldn't be that the president comes in and then just says, now it's like he's the king and now this is how it works. That's not how it works. Like, that seems to be what people want to happen, though, and we're seeing more executive power and that kind of stuff. I think, to me, just as people talk about eroding of different values in different parts of the political system, that to me is a concern. On the other hand, I definitely see, like, it would be great just to change it overnight. But I think we just looked this up earlier today. 17.7% of the gross domestic product in the United States revolves around healthcare. I don't care what you do. If you change that, it will be disruptive. There's markets, all these companies are publicly traded. There's futures on them. There's derivatives. There's all these financial parts of the health insurance, not to mention the people they employ, here, overseas, the supply chains. It's all tightly coupled.
Right.
With that being said, now how do you undo this system? I don't love that there's a huge profit incentive in the medical field. I think it's hard. I don't know how this should be set up, because people make the argument then, well, okay, the profit incentive is for innovation, and in some ways, like, I do know people come here for, like, some of the treatments we have here, they don't have anywhere else. We have some very novel stuff because there's this profit incentive, but the other reason a lot of these things are expensive is because of the regulations around them too. So you have this coupled system where, like, what level of freedom do you want for your overall society? How does that feed into how quickly you can make changes? And then what's incentivizing those changes once they're in place? I think people will, like, doctors want to become doctors. I don't think, first of all, to make $400,000 a year. I see these guys, it's miserable most of the process, and then they become doctors and it kind of sucks.
Right.
For a lot of I think they get into it for that. I think the researchers and this and that may be a different story. I think biomedical fields, but those are kind of my two things. Like, how quickly can it change, and then what's the incentive for this whole industry? I'm not sure having it profit driven is the best option, but I'm kind of it's one of those kind of hard spots. But
so a couple things real quick. One, whenever people say gridlock in Washington, or things aren't getting done quick enough, or this process is taking too long, like, my thought is, thank God that we are not a reactionary, drop of the hat, law changing society. I think that is good. Honestly, I think that is a much more stable society than ones that, are blown in the wind a little bit here and there. So I actually think that gridlock is good in some cases because it prevents overreactions. Now, that leads directly into your second point of, we kind of want a king, so to speak, or this executive power that has been expanding and expanding, really in the last several presidential terms. People want the president to sign something with a pen and then it be law. Like, that is directly in conflict to how our Constitution is set up, and that's not how things are supposed to work. So I think that people who want something that is an executive order for the single payer thing, I think is honestly bad legislation. Like, that is antithetical to how our system is supposed to work. It should go through Congress and become a law that way. It shouldn't be signed by an executive order. Now, that is just my opinion. People would argue, well, okay, that's the only way to get things done anymore because there's too much gridlock.
Right.
Okay. Well, that is a concern. We can get to that some other time. Not really focused on that right now. Another thing you mentioned is the profit-driven thing. So my not fleshed out idea, or is it fleshed? I never know the difference, and I honestly don't care, people. So
Ooh,
yeah,
I don't know.
Don't email us on that one. But
fleshed out. I like fleshed. Right. It's like
fleshed out is a term, but I don't know.
I think it's fleshed out, but I like flushed because like fleshed out. Anyway, it's
what?
Not sure.
I'm not going to look it up. People do not email us. So what you said about not
Snapchat.
Right, there you go. Profit driven, right? So my kind of current best theory on how things should work is we should use the government to keep the big businesses in check, but use the government as well to manipulate the markets just enough to where the profit incentive makes sense. So, okay, let me try to make that a little bit more coherent. Basically, if we could have some method of a government subsidized program for like the people I was saying earlier, the low income, the elderly, the disabled, people who can't who can't provide healthcare really through some other means. Okay, so we have a system for that. My system would be something where that is government subsidized for people to take that to the exchange, which I actually think is a pretty decent thing now that it's been set up and it's gotten off the ground a little bit. It has made shopping for insurance not the hardest thing in the world. I've done it. It's not the easiest, but it's not the worst either. So a government program gives you a debit card, basically, just like WIC, and they say you can only spend this on healthcare, and then you go find whatever healthcare you want.
Essentially, they should just make health HSAs, health savings accounts, because that's how health savings account works. You have a debit card and it's tax free.
I would just say that we'd probably need some controls on the market to provide, because if you gave people, let's say $6,000 a year, or let's just say $12,000 a year, $1,000 a month, for your premiums, that the companies who used to charge, let's just say $6,000 worth of premiums, would then the minimum plan would then be $12,000 a year. They would max it out instantly, so that they were taking every dime of that money and nothing was left over for your deductible if something actually happened, right? So that's another thing I just kind of wanted to mention. Like, it's easy to say like single payer, I guess it's less of an argument for that, but just to admit that there are problems with my kind of ideas too. These profit driven companies will, not might, but will figure out how to take every dime of that government money that they can and charge those people more when they can figure out how to do it. So, there's going to have to be some other market, or there's going to have to be some other controls. And as much as I don't like big government might be the best function to control that.
Yeah, I think, we've seen, I know you're not biggest fan of big government, but we've seen, as you said, sometimes it can be helpful. And we've, the early oil and steel and railroads, when those large organizations got split up in the early 20th century, the question, so that is a little bit more totalitarian and less democratic and less capitalistic in a lot of ways. But the thing is that better? I think most people would say that was probably better off for the entirety of the U.S. I think some people would say maybe that should happen for these companies. These companies shouldn't be privately traded. They shouldn't. They should get broken up. Oh, like people who provide insurance, people who are operating,
like State Farm, AT&T, like large companies like that, providing basic services.
I'm saying regarding the health insurance, the health industry and health insurance specifically. Yeah. Okay. I think the question to me is, like, if you go to Singlepayer, I just don't see how those companies exist. So that's, to me, like, are those companies getting broken up? And if you can say pretty concrete, that will be disruptive, but will that be better for the overall health of the nation?
The long term, right?
In long term. That's what's hard with the democracy, is getting those kind of long-term goals aligned.
Right. And, people say like, well, yeah, that it's been tried, various very small monocultural European countries, have single payer healthcare, and it's working, and, blah, 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 and it's great. But, correct me if I'm wrong, if you think I'm wrong, but comparing those to a country like ours just isn't a really fair comparison.
I don't think it's fair, and especially considering how different the states are and how many rights the states have. I think that also further complicates it, whereas most of these, they might have smaller, like Canada has several provinces, but it's not 50 states with distinct laws, where states are explicitly given the powers not granted to the federal government. So
Right.
So I think that compounds it. And yeah, I mean, just the heterogeneity in the United States does make it more difficult, and just the size and sort of I would say just culturally too, there's this, I was just listening to someone talk about like the maverick, the rebel, the anti-establishment. That attitude is still part of American culture, something that should be, is a good thing in a lot of ways, but that does make it harder to pass these group, bring it all together kind of messages like this, where like everyone's contributing, everyone's getting it back kind of idea. Like people, I think those two things can kind of be in conflict, which is part of the good part of the United States, working for yourself, struggling, this and that. So that's kind of why I think that comparison is challenging. Now, on certain cities, certain states, maybe they can try it. And we've seen like San Francisco I know in particular has a totally different healthcare system than the rest of California. Even like it's right. Totally different. So,
and that goes to states' rights,
right?
Like you were saying earlier.
Yeah. And then you've seen all these states expand Medicare, and which seems to actually be quite popular with voters. You've seen that, even Kentucky, all these places where they were against it, and then they expanded Medicare, and they go, oh shoot, well now we have healthcare, so we like this. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm confused by what the single payer people don't like about expanding Medicaid, or what? Yeah, the low income
expanding Medicare and Medicaid. I actually don't know all the details on those. I don't know I don't know what the apprehension to expanding those. I think it's just the fact that it's not a big enough change.
I see.
I think is.
Yeah,
I think is a big part of it.
I feel like so if we went to single payer, how are we going to demand that these companies continue to innovate like they have without that have the single payer people address that issue? Is it just going to be?
I have no idea, and I also don't know that much. I mean, the only part I know about innovation and research and medical stuff is basically biomedical and stuff done at universities. And the stuff done at universities that's innovative is mostly funded by either nonprofits like various institutes run by Bill Gates and people like that, or it's just money from the government goes to these research hospitals and they do the research there. So it's like already a lot of the innovation, a lot of the research stuff is funded by the government anyway. So I sort of like the fact. Like people equate innovation with profit driven, but these universities that do a lot of it are nonprofits as well.
Well,
but I think this is different than well, most universities are classified as nonprofits.
The classified, but
classified. Yeah, I agree. They're a bunch of mostly idiots, and they just want to. Yeah, I agree. They're not really, but that's what they're classified as. Right. And then I think there's the side of the biomedical and the pharmaceutical industry, where there is tremendous profit and there's tremendous incentive to bring drugs to market. And if you make the next Viagra or aspirin or whatever, you billions of dollars, but it's high stakes,
Right,
that I guess those two things are kind of. I feel like in my mind you would decouple those.
Mm-hmm. So basically make all research, including drug research, under the FDA wing, basically.
Well,
you know,
but
kind
yeah,
of
I
make
mean,
it
I don't know how it
government-run.
all works now, but I mean, I think it kind of already is. So I guess maybe
Right.
I'm kind of answering my own question in terms of the profit motivation. I guess I just don't like that the insurance, people providing insurance have an incentive for you to get worse care for yourself, right? They want to pay less money, right? They want to pay less out of pocket. They would like you to see the doctor less, right? Am I wrong? I mean, that's like if you're going to the doctor less, you're charging these companies less money. Like insurance companies want to have the fewest claims or
Right.
charge enough to cover those claims. So I
Right.
guess I see that as kind of the issue. It's sort of like private prisons. Like they have incentive to put people into prison. That sort of seems, and then they lobbied the local governments to change the laws to put more people in jail. That's sort of
Right.
where I get a little annoyed. Maybe maybe oversimplistic. Maybe I'm wrong, but
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think that is a valid point, that a lot of government funded, public funded money, lots of tax money goes to medical research. So
yeah,
you could make
NIH,
the argument.
DOE, DOD. I mean, these anyway, directly and indirectly fund all kinds of medical stuff.
Right. So you could make the argument that the research, that maybe even the research and the drugs don't have to be profit driven. Maybe you could make that argument, but like you were saying earlier, the disruption to the marketplace, especially if it was done in a really band-aid like fashion, yeah, just seems to me to be too extreme, and honestly not what people want. I think particularly certain subsets of the Libertarian Party, I mean the Democratic Party, see this band-aid and see these moves as so blatantly obvious as the thing to do, that it really doesn't leave a whole lot of room for discussion, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that implementing certain aspects of a single payer system is great. Like I like certain aspects of Obamacare, the pre-existing conditions thing, staying on the insurance, parents' insurance till later. Like, were you gonna say something?
Oh, the pre-existing condition one. Now, I think people should be able to get insurance if they have a pre-existing condition in most cases. But you got to look at it. I think people just instantly go like, "Oh, that's screwed up." Like they have cancer, they can't get insurance. So it's like if you never had insurance and then you got cancer and then you tried to get insurance, it's like you can see why they didn't want to do that. Right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like
For sure.
like people are so black. Like that issue. Like I used to be like so, and I was like, oh, I was like, wait a minute. Like think about it from their perspective. Like I understand why they don't want to do it. If someone comes in and they have cancer, they're going to lose money on that person. They know that. But that's also why I don't like that they're incentivized to make money off of a person's well-being. That's to me the fundamental problem. But
I think that the idea would be that you would have signed up with that company when you turned 18. In
Right.
an alternate universe, you would have signed up with that company when you were 18, and you would have had it till you're 55 when you got cancer. So you were paying in the whole time.
Right.
So I think then the company would say, so essentially what we would be doing is taking our tax money and at the point of the government's gun, because if you don't pay the IRS, you can go to jail. And if you don't want to go to jail, you can get shot. So therefore, we're talking about life and death here, which may seem extreme, but people have and will lose lives over taxes. Like that's what our country was founded on. Like it will happen again. So,
Anyway, yeah, it's just sort of the pre-existing conditions thing. I understand that people. I want people to get health care if they have a debilitating condition, regardless. But I understand why companies don't want to do it as it stands now. Like you got to understand that. Like, you got to be like, okay, I understand. Like, how can we make this better? Like, you got to take care of these people. You can't just throw them under the bus. Like, I mean, philosophically, I guess I have like a philosophical belief on healthcare. Then I have like, what is the reality? And I think those two things you got to have sort of decoupled.
Well, I think for really every major issue you have to do that these days. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I try to talk about these things in a decoupled thing, and then I try to, then my feelings about them kind of go, kick into gear after I've thought about them, just kind of on a top level. So, there's trying to discuss single payer healthcare and the various options that are out there really with any amount of time is going to be impossible. But I think I just wanted to kind of ramble and jump from a few topics and talk about this. And I think that the fractious nature on both sides right now, like I guess you could call the Republicans kind of united with Trump right now, right? But I think that under that, I think that there is a really, really distrustful, really sick and tired of it attitude from especially a younger maybe conservatives out there.
What do you, I mean, from your perspective, where do you, like, why do you think it got to this point for some people?
Well, I think, what turned me off the Republican Party was they continued to talk about fiscal responsibility and then never
practicing it. Yeah, I'm glad you bring that one up. They need to get more flack for that, because it's really, I think they would actually, that one is a big one. Mm-hmm.
Someone made the point the other day that the Republicans have lucked out in the last like 50 years election cycle wise and budgetarily wise, that they've been able to cut taxes as soon as things were going right for the Democrat guy, and then by the time the Democrat got elected in response to that guy, like they would get stuck. So like the Republicans have been skating on this fiscal responsibility thing just because they have been able to cut taxes a little bit here and there for certain people, but not having done it in a meaningful way, and they haven't cut any budgets in decades. So I know people always, when I talk to them about this issue, would bring up Ronald Reagan, and this is the only tiny bit of research that I did on it. Was I just looked up what laws did he pass that reduced, and he did reduce taxes when he first got in. The first couple of years, I don't remember the exact timeline, but in the first couple of years he did reduce taxes. Then he did, and then he had to re-raise a lot of them. That he promised not to. That he promised not to. Famous. Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, I mean, overall, I think he technically did lower overall taxes. I'm not sure how that was measured. My understanding is he technically did, but it's not the drastic like tax cutter that people, some kind of crusader that people point him out to be, make him out to be. No. At least from my basic research. No, you're definitely right. There's a famous speech out there where he says, I said no more taxes, and I'm here today to say that's what I meant, but and then he explains why he's going to have to raise taxes. And it's like, all these frankly boomer Republicans out there. Boomer Republicans, you heard it. Yeah, sorry, but they hail Reagan as some gun-toting, giving it to the snowflakes. He really knew, dude. He was a California liberal who did more against gun rights. Store. Yeah, he did more against gun rights than really any Democrat could dream in today's environment. He actually made it illegal for full auto guns to be sold. And Reagan did. Really? Yeah, I had no idea. Interesting. Yeah, exactly. So people say, Reagan, he really knew what was up. Oops, that guy, dude. He was a fucking idiot. Like, oh wow, okay. Oops, that. Yeah. Okay. And you know what? I haven't done that much research either, but from what I have, I think that Reagan's whole thing is completely overblown, and I think he did a lot of things that were against freedom, against fiscal responsibility, and against liberty too, actually. Oh, with that being, talking about freedom and liberty within the government, that's actually that's an issue I used to not even think about so much. Probably in the last 6-7 years, I've thought way more about, and particularly within the context of electronic and information and privacy. And this is something I want to bring up because I'm not sure this has gotten a lot of news, and I kind of just that right now they are trying to
basically, let's see, I'm trying to frame this in a way
Yeah.
that makes some sense here. Basically, end-to-end encryption, like when you send a message, emails and this and that, and text messages, it can be encrypted so only the receiver and the transmitter can see the message. It cannot be intercepted mid-flight, basically.
Okay.
And this is called end-to-end encryption, and it's what the Signal uses. The guy who developed Signal is the guy who basically pioneered a lot of the end-to-end encryption, made it publicly available. It's used in WhatsApp and Skype.
Signal, for those who don't know, is just like a text messaging app.
Very secure. And I'll talk a little bit more about Signal as well. But yeah, that's a good point to bring up of what it is. Yeah, it's a messaging app. And now, go ahead. Nick.
Basically, you can send. Encryption works like a passcode ring. So each person has the passcode, and only those two people. It's the truly uninterceptable messaging type of security, I guess.
Guaranteed through mathematics and cryptography and all kinds of algorithmic complexities. Not that interesting interesting to some people. I find
right. I was going to say it's mathematically impossible to do
it on any kind of time scale of humans. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
But so the point is, this end-to-end encryption right now, and this is we're talking about what, like you were just saying, what turned you off about the Republican Party, and we can talk about turned you off about the Democrats and this and that too, to be fair, at some point. But what really upsets me is right now the Republicans, I forgot, a couple of pretty prominent guys are trying to push legislation that will force companies like Apple, Google, to give law enforcement the ability to intercept, to basically negate end-to-end encryption. This is happening right now. They want a passkey. This is, and that's a huge violation. People go, well, it's going to help, law enforcement. Local law enforcement says, well, we can't do our job because we can't intercept this message. It would help us out. Like, we'll solve more crimes. That's their argument. And I think these issues, and it's very sad that it's the Republicans driving this, because I feel like they, again, claim to be liberty and freedom, and then they are trying to go after, in my mind, your basic privacy rights, and they're trying to do it on this very technical level. And I don't think they understand even how it works, but I just see it as they're trying to erode this ability to correspond privately, which I think is an important part of living in the United States. I think this should be allowed. So
totally.
Something I'm sure you probably agree. I think a lot of people do, but I think it should be just discussed a little bit here while we're talking politics. Yeah. Anyway, I was just sort of on my mind.
Definitely.
This week.
That brings up another reason I really lost faith in the Republicans is when Bush started the war. One, he did it through executive order, basically, they did get war authorization. We've continued to use that same war authorization until 2020.
Right.
So literally for every major,
but they did it under lies. I mean, they did it. They just,
well, true, yeah.
They lied about all that, and it's all come out. I mean, the weapons of mass. They all lied about the weapons of mass destruction. And they did under false pretenses. Right.
But setting that aside, it was clear that they were willing to, especially when the stuff about the Patriot Act came out, they were willing to do anything to, quote unquote, keep us safe. And, like Xander just said, that is, I think, antithetical to our country. And, I mean, it's clearly against the Fourth Amendment, right? Fourth Amendment is unreasonable search and seizure. So, I mean, we have an amendment about that already. I think it's a clear violation of that amendment. I think that it's un-American to want the police to have that much power. Now, I also want to preface real quick before you say anything that, and I alluded to this, I think, in one of the other episodes, but I am very pro police officer. I'm very wary of the police. I think that, I know a lot of police officers. I've worked with a lot of former police officers. I used to work in a gun range, and literally almost everybody there was a former police officer or a veteran. I talked to them quite a bit off the record about a lot of stuff, And while I know that they are just trying to do their job and they just want to keep people safe, which I think is one of the most noble things you could do in a civilized society like we have, I honestly, I started a company recently devoted to trying to help those people because I respect them so much. At the same time, I don't want them to have that technology. I don't care that it makes it easier for them to solve crime. I don't care that it, might, I think people would honestly go to that, well, it might save an officer's life someday, or it might save public lives someday. And that is the scary price of freedom, right? I mean, that's part of the reason I'm pro-gun. I'm pro people protecting themselves. I'm pro personal protection. Some famous old quote is Sam Colt made all men equal, some dumb thing like that. But the gun or self-defense methods, if it's mace or something, if that's what you can do, those are defensive equalizers in modern day, and I think that those should be protected. And I think that scary liberty is better than boring servitude, basically. I don't think that we should be at the whim of police officers who just want to look through our phones no matter what.
Right. Well, it's interesting you bring up the guns, because I see the argument a lot of the more conservatives and people on the pro-gun side say, well, okay, you make guns illegal, the criminals will still get to the guns, right? I think that's like a general statement people make. And I think the same is going to be and that's what's so frustrating, is the same is true about this encryption technology. This technology, if you make it so like mainstream phone, like Apple and Google Android phones will have a backdoor, criminals will just not use them. There are other services. There are things like that's what's so frustrating, is they don't understand that this encryption technology is so impressive is because you actually can make one and you can get away from they can't control it. They can make a signal. They can make something like a Tor there is a part of the internet, the dark web, where you have a Tor browser and you can communicate with people totally anonymously, and it's over these distributed networks, and people can't trace them. They can't control it, and it frightens them. I know it does. Right. But the thing is, that's what criminals will use. And if you just make this kind of legislation, I think it's just it might solve more crimes. I give it that. I would go so far to say as it would solve some crimes. Like there's criminals like petty, like stupid criminals using Apple iMessages. Those get intercepted, like some people doing like talking about drugs, and they get intercepted by local cops. Okay, that's fair. Right. But I think it's the same argument that people make about guns, is like, okay, criminals will still get to them some way because they'll go through illegal channels. If you make peer-to-peer encryption illegal, so to speak, there's ways around it. That's the point. So it kind of, to me, it only affects the law-abiding people, and the people using like mainstream normal people. It's going to affect the most. Right. That's like, so to me, it's like, okay, like Republicans, you guys say this is the same argument. Just why? How can you have these two? To me, like they're totally at odds with each other, and that's like those kinds of things just piss me off. So that's why my faith in political parties in general has really eroded. I don't feel like the parties themselves really do much to make our election cycles go any easier. In fact, I think that they're actively bad for us. Again, I understand that freedom of speech means that you can affiliate yourself with whatever political party you would want to, and that's fine. But I think that maybe you could get some people to just, maybe in the future, maybe at some point, go third party. Well, no, that's not actually going to happen. No, I don't think so. So like here's the thing. Like you want people to come together, but you'd also seem kind of against political parties. Like, how do you reconcile kind of those two sort of, well, I think not necessarily opposing ideas, but sort of,
Yeah, well, I think that the parties invoke a tribalism in people, and it's really easy to, I think if you if you woke up tomorrow and political parties weren't a thing, so you couldn't call somebody a liberal or a conservative or a Democrat or a Republican, you just called them A, B, C, or D. Let's say, like just make up some name in your head. Like, I think it would quickly devolve into the exact same thing if you made two big ones and called them, Party A and Party B. Like, eventually the people would just segregate themselves into exactly what they were before, and then we're going to end up in the same place. Like, I just feel like the title is such a tribal thing to people, and such an ingrained, like, I am part of this party. Like,
Okay.
These are my people. These people, no matter what, are better than those other people. And if you can put a name to those other people, whether it's Party A or B or Democrat or Republican, I think it's easier for people to default to that in their mind and not critically think about things.
So uniting, like, what do you unite people under? Like, an idea?
Well, I don't
like, what do you
think-
call, like, how is that, I guess that uniting process to me is...
Well, I didn't mean unite,
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay.
Because
Well,
I think a lot of people are not going to be able to come to a firm agreement on a lot of these topics. I don't think that there's like a solution that's going to make everybody happy, right? But if we could tone down the rhetoric between the two sides, and I guess that's more what I meant to say, where we have these conversations, but we have them in a respectful way. And even when we're talking about the other side, who frequently people on the left think that people who voted for Trump are evil or like bad people or dumb or, are not critical thinkers or not all these things. And I think that that's not good for anybody, because at some point, those people are going to feel like, okay, I'm fed up. Like, I am going to vote for Trump, or they're going to feel like, I'm going to vote for President X in the future that is more extreme than they would normally be comfortable with. But you know what? Like, these people think that I'm this person, so I am part of this party. Like, screw you guys. I am part of this thing. So I just think it makes it too easy for people to... So if you didn't have political parties, if we made a law, which again is unconstitutional, it's not going to happen. But in my universe, if you had candidates on a ballot that had just their names, and I mean, you'd have way less turnout, I guarantee you, because it's not as easy for people. But I think that the votes that you got would be more researched and probably better at running a society. Does that make sense?
Excuse me. Yeah. It makes some sense. It's a... What am I trying to put here? I think that just this bringing people together. I guess the tribalism sort of ingrained, and toning down the rhetoric. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I was thinking, you were talking, I was thinking about, okay, how do you get people to tone down the rhetoric? And I think we actually have a concrete solution here.
What is it?
I think we buy a bunch of plane tickets, and I think everyone gets to switch spots for like a couple weeks. I think if
trading spouses.
Trading lives. Like, if you live in let's say southern Georgia, you should go and hang out in Harvard Square. And you should come to Seattle and look at these people living under the freeway, and see if that makes you change your mind about healthcare or drug addiction. And then, like, also people from San Francisco go and hang out in Kentucky, and go and see what those people are going through. I just think, I mean, it's so simple, but I just think you got to send. This is also how I plan to deal with the terrorism problem too. They'll hang out for a couple weeks in San Diego on the beach, and they get to smoke a lot of pot. That's my solution for that too. So mostly my solutions involve a lot of plane tickets, which on the scale of things are pretty cheap.
That's
so
true,
maybe like it's millions of dollars, but think about the impact that would have if you sent half of Jackson, Mississippi, or maybe something more rural to Seattle for a couple days. Some kind of maybe even like a music festival or something. This is like, but it's switched. It's sort of You have people coming and they get to visit and they get to see the other side, like see why people care about these things, like why they're voting to increase your taxes, like why they're voting to decrease the taxes, like why they want a gun in this area, why they on their street they get shot up all the time. Maybe they you go to south side of Chicago, west side of Chicago, and they get shot up. Maybe you're like, okay, I'm tired of guns. I hear gunshots every night. There's Labor Day weekend, there's 60 shootings,
Right.
Okay, and then you go down to southern Georgia and you go, well, okay, I see why you might want a gun. You're in the middle of nowhere and there's wild hogs, or whatever it is. That's my solution. So we've come to a concrete solution here, Nick. What do you think?
Well, it's testable. That's
it's testable.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what is the metric that we're gonna test it on. Are they gonna improve? What metric of life improvement will we
randomized control studies where we get some segment of the population to get shipped over and you see how they vote and their overall. Can you do some surveys over time or something?
Okay, I was gonna say, like, did this experience change your mind? Like, would be the question.
Yeah, maybe like looking at voter history and maybe just ask the questionnaires. Some self-reporting. It would be hard to measure, sure.
Yeah, I'm just thinking. One thing I want to mention too is I am fully on board with that laboratory of democracy things for our states. I really like that California and Oregon and Washington are trying these, some would say, more liberal ideas on homelessness or guns or all these different things. Like I also think that is a very important thing about our system, that these states do get to try all these ideas and see what works, right? Like that's good. That is a good thing. I don't agree. Like I wouldn't want to live in certain states because of certain policies sometimes, but I think that is. I think I can not want to live in California and still be very pro whatever they're trying, because hey, they're trying it. Like San Francisco's trying their own healthcare system. Like hey, great. Like if San Francisco feels like they needed it at a local level, great. So the state government didn't have to step in, the federal government didn't have to step in, the city just did it, So keeping things as local as possible is very important too, in my opinion. The more local things are, the greater the impact that the tax dollars go, I think, anyway. The county people who are spending this money know the other county residents, and it's a lot harder to spend money in frivolous ways, if you know the person who's doing the construction work rather than a nameless Caltrans guy on the side of the highway that you're never going to see. There's 5 of them leaning up against a shovel. All your tax dollars are paying for them, but he's just some guy. You're not going to pull over and be like, hey man, get back to work. Like, that's my money you're wasting there, right? So
I suppose. Yeah. I don't know if I'd ever pull over and yell at someone like working outside. That seems.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you'd be a crazy person.
Yeah. Okay, so where are you going? So you do or do not like the idea of shipping people around the United States on planes?
Oh, I'm very pro. I mean,
okay.
it is pretty cost effective. Yeah.
I guess my takeaways are just improving empathy. And leading these conversations, like when I spent a bunch of time in northern Florida, which is pretty conservative, and I on purpose would go to this kind of racist old barber, and who definitely voted for Trump, had Fox News blaring, and I would just let him talk to me, and I would just listen, because it was just like, it was fascinating. And like the first time I was like kind of like annoyed, and then I was like, but this guy, like, I see where this guy, like, I kind of understand where he's coming from. Like his information comes from here. He's lived here, and like I see why he's confused about some things. Like he genuinely, like when that Black Lives Matter thing, he was like, for him, growing up there, being a white guy, he didn't understand why they were so upset. He didn't understand why they're saying that. Like genuinely, people are like, oh, this guy's an asshole. It's like, no, he just doesn't get it. He doesn't get why they get to act the way that they're doing, why they're protesting. Just didn't get it. He just couldn't
comprehend that.
Couldn't comprehend it.
That is interesting. That would be a great experiment, to have some billionaire just buy plane tickets. Like don't do it through the government. Just have billionaires do it and try it. I think that that gets to what I'm trying to say. Like, I think
bringing people together on seeing each other's point of view.
Obviously, logistically, like, we're probably not going to make this happen, right? Like flying people to and from all around the country. But if a politician took the time, like if Nancy Pelosi went to some southern state and just walked around and talked to people, and didn't do it for the camera and just literally like walked around and talked to people, I would have infinitely more respect for her than I do most anybody else in the California legislature. Like, it's just, if people were, so I think that because it's not logistically feasible to fly individual people around the United States, I think that in a perfect world, our elected officials would be those olive branch bearers, right? Between people, and say like, hey, you know what? I don't agree with this person, but like Trump fans trying to shut down somebody from speaking or something, just make up an example. He should say, hey, that is bad. I don't agree with that person, but that is bad. We should allow that person to speak. I want to hear what that person has to say. Like, I think that we should strive for that. And I don't know, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. If you're willing to try that and try to bring the other side along, so to speak, along, you'd have my vote, I think. Okay. Really, regardless of your actual policies.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty noble way to vote in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. So do you have a pick? Are you going to talk specifics? You got specifics? I don't. It's really funny hearing people talk about it. I actually heard someone on NPR this morning say they like Michael Bloomberg. I just thought it was hilarious. Yeah, I just was like, oh, this guy. I thought he was just playing around on this election. I guess he's serious. I just thought he was some kind of like, honestly, if I had billions of dollars, I would run for president. Like, just for the fun of it.
Sure.
Like, people dissuade the fact that it probably on some level is an ego and a rush to run for president. Like, if you could run for president, like, what a rush. I mean, people need to
especially
try and put yourself in his shoes. I know it's hard. You can do anything. Why not run for president?
Oops. Okay. Oh, dude! If you could, because you couldn't buy this amount of media. I mean, he's buying an insane amount of media, but you couldn't buy the kind of attention you get on these debates, right? Like, you just couldn't buy that amount of attention. So to get your ideas out there, if you're a billionaire, hell yeah, run for president. Who cares?
I know people are like, what's his idea? And like, what's his motivation? I was like, I don't know him. I've never done much research. I know that Bloomberg is a respected financial institution. I know when he was the mayor, he went to great lengths to not report on himself when he was the mayor of New York. But I'm sure in some way it's just a thrill, just to get up there and just plop yourself in front of this, show up in this race. He just like cheated I feel like he cheated a marathon. Like, there's marathon cheaters. That's a thing.
Right.
He came in on like mile 23 and is like, oh, why are you guys so tired? Like, can't you guys just like get a car and drive the rest? Like,
no sweat at all. Like, he's just like perfectly crisp.
Yeah, he's like in a suit and they're all running and he's like, everyone's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm here. Gotcha.
Hey man, I'm here. Right.
Yeah. That's. Again, I just think it's kind of my outlook now. Like, I was thinking about it for a while, and I think he's just enjoying his billionaire. Like, what do you do when you're a billionaire? I mean,
it is an insane amount of money to think about. He is so rich that he could go through this entire thing and get up to the debate with Trump, and then drop like a D's nuts at the very end and just walk away. Like, he's that. Yeah. Rich. Well, I mean, it'd be funny just to screw with like really hollowed institutions like that. Like,
I mean, I think there's something to be said for him just having his own money. Like, he's not getting any contribution. Like, people like that about Trump. People really like that. But people like that about Trump. But man, Michael Bloomberg is like just very rich compared to Trump. Trump's not that rich. He's all. Right. He inspires me, though. He inspires me that I can be in debt and still be rich. That's what my takeaway from the Trump presidency is, that I can own real estate and that I can be in debt while simultaneously looking really rich.
Oh, see, my takeaway is whatever you say is your reality. So if you say that you are rich and you are big man in charge, then you are at a certain point. Kind of your fake it till you make it thing.
Would you say that's positive visualization? I mean, to the
I guess,
extreme.
yeah.
To delusion.
Yeah, right. I mean, he wrote it to the presidency. You can't argue that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's working pretty well for him, right? People think he's an idiot, but I mean, he is the president. He's got to be doing at least a little bit, right?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about the imposter syndrome. What's the opposite of the imposter syndrome? Because I think that's
right.
That's what he has, which is
egomaniacal, like.
I mean, something along that. A little delusional, but at the same time, you got to have some of that to get to those levels. Like,
yep,
I was just hearing this guy who worked with Elon Musk talk about his idea for the future, like what drives him, and he said Elon is driven by what can he do that will more quickly, at least in regards like SpaceX, get a colony onto Mars. Like his lens is this Mars, like getting to Mars. And it's like, that's kind of crazy. And like to think that you can do that. But at the same time, if you don't have that kind of delusion, or maybe not delusion, like that kind of
we might make
creative process. Now, Elon Musk, I think, is brilliant, like mind of a generation. So I think he's in a little bit different spot. But at the same time, that kind of attitude, like having that kind of confidence,
right?
Something to it. There's something to it, even if it's totally ridiculous. Like, I mean, I know I've gotten up and given presentations, and I just gave it with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of like, this is true, and people believe it, and like, and it's scientific stuff, and like, you could definitely question it. But if you say it's just it's just interesting, this delusion, and like you said, what's your reality is whatever you say it is, So
right. I was going to mention something else about Trump. But I don't remember.
He loves being in the news. I think he just gets off
my
on
picks.
that. Oh, your picks.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Nick's picks. That could be a new segment on the show. Nick's picks.
So we'll start with Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg. The first thing to be honest, first thing I think of is stop and frisk, and like how his what his crime policy was. And then if you look into it a little bit more, he seems to like that term racist gets thrown around a lot. I don't particularly use it a lot, but it seems like, oh, you're a racist, you made a dumb joke. But Mike Bloomberg seems to have a weird racial thing going on. I'm not going to call him racist, I guess, but he seems to have some very odd attitudes.
Look, he doesn't trust black people,
Americans. Yeah, okay, well, yeah.
I mean, look, he's a certain age. I kind of just assume there's some level of race. Like, it's just, I'm not, I don't think it's good. I don't like it at all. I just kind of assume
that's just
there.
my first,
okay.
If you do that Rorschach test or whatever, like, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. So it was really surprising to me that he was getting much of any traction at all. I guess that's my, my thoughts shaded by previous reading things about him, but I was just like, Jesus Christ, like this guy's.
He's also very against guns. And that's him telling me that. I've seen that on YouTube ads.
That's true.
He's the most against guns. He claims to be. So
I do give him credit for at least.
He is very honest about it.
Yeah. At least not doing that Democratic thing like, oh, I respect the Second Amendment. But
I don't think he does. I don't think he does.
No, he doesn't. No.
Which I actually, like you said, I respect that he just doesn't care. He just comes out with it and just sticks it. He's just like on these ads, I'm the most against guns. Okay, you are. Done. That's fine. I actually respect that a little bit more.
I was just going to say right there, I feel like I don't think it's incongruous to say I don't like anything about Mike Bloomberg, really, his policies, his attitudes, his personality, probably. I don't feel like I would like the guy at all, but I still respect him for putting his ideas out there and sticking to them, at least in terms of guns, like sticking to them throughout the years and really never changing his attitude on them. So that is respectable while at the same time being reprehensible to me. So
yeah, but you can kind of see, I mean, like in some ways, Nick, like you could see where he's coming from a little bit, right? Like he's been in New York, for sure. And he's seen the gun violence there, and the gun laws there are very strong, and it seems to be correlated with decreased murder rates and this and that. So I kind of see whether it's right or wrong, and constitutional this and that. You kind of got to see a little bit where he's coming from on that issue.
Yeah. Oh, and
Yeah.
I can respect his, and I guess hopefully this is okay to say, but I can respect the data while still believing in gun rights. I
Okay.
guess.
Yeah. That's. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the data is
that's-
it's all interpreted, and data can be filtered and manipulated. It's interpreted.
Right.
Like it's a person is analyzing the data. So yeah.
To me, it kind of goes back to that safety versus liberty thing. Like, yeah, statistically, the murders went down, but to the individual person who might have, wanted a gun for self-defense that was harmed in some way, like it makes a humongous difference to that person. So, it's a nuanced issue for sure. So, okay, that's Bloomberg.
Nick's picks continued.
Yeah, Nick's picks continued. Warren, I don't really understand the appeal of her. I just think she's really odd, honestly. Nick's... she just gives me a weird oogie vibe. And
that's
I don't
called
really
voting
care
with your
for
gut. That's voting with your gut. Hey,
right. Well, we started with a disclaimer here, so
that's what people do. So I think that's fair. Totally fair.
No, to be honest, I've heard her. She seems a little wishy-washy on some stuff too. She's gone back on a few things, but a couple of her actual policies, I'm definitely not in agreement with. Like, I think she's I don't know if she's a single payer or like a modified single payer or something like that, but definitely not a huge fan. Bernie, definitely not a huge fan. I think he is genuine. I do respect him.
So this genuine, that's like what's always thrown around with Bernie is like genuine. I would believe him. I trust him.
I didn't say those other two.
Okay, you didn't say. I'm saying, I guess in general. In general.
Right.
At least you capitulate the first one. And
I think he genuinely believes what he believes and genuinely believes what he's saying.
Why does that go far for you? Why? I'm just curious. Why does that?
Well, it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't, because I disagree with him on his solutions, but I guess I respect him because he also seems to have not really changed his tune over the years and has stuck with relatively the same ideas. Granted, I would rather he look at some data on some of this stuff and update his ideas.
People respect that he's kept the same idea. Like on the surface, like my gut reaction, oh, that is good. But then I'm like, people get upset at politicians for changing their opinions, but I think that's what you need to do.
I think so.
I'm always like sort of like confounded by this sort of duality here again.
Yeah, I think it's when it's like playing to a crowd to me. So if it's a town in the South, like you don't play up that you're pro-gay or something, and then or you say that you're pro-gun there, but then when you get to the West Coast, it's all about gay rights and how guns are bad kind of thing.
Sure.
So I think it's Bernie seems to always have the same message no matter what. I don't agree with his solutions, really, any of them, but I do respect that he has ideas, and going back to the single payer thing real quick, like no one actually knows what it would look like to rip off a Band-Aid of the United States healthcare system. Like that amount of change has never happened before.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to compare it to, right?
Right.
So it's really hard for people, like when people say like if we go to single payer, then this will happen. Like then this will happen is where I really have problems, because we don't know that we have nothing to compare to, so we don't know what is going to happen if we went to a single payer, with the stroke of a pen, basically.
Well, and this is where, so I think, let's just imagine it does go, just kind of following on this issue a little bit, if this Band-Aid gets ripped off and something like this big change happens, okay, a lot of people get healthcare. Maybe some people get healthier. I think this is a point that I never thought about until kind of recently, is that the economic well-being of the country is also very directly coupled to health and violence and crime. So you go, okay, it's like to me, like the concern now. I think it might overall be better to go to single payer, but probably. But I'd like to see some kind of research on it. But I think the thing you have to weigh is like, okay, now this part of the population now has healthcare, is getting healthier, is getting treatment, is getting preventative maintenance, so to speak, on their bodies,
Right.
Getting
Right.
physicals, this and that. Now, but you have this huge disruption in the economy. We know people are poor, crimes go up, this and that, drug use goes up, health goes down, stress increases, all these long-term illnesses like that are particularly stress related when you have money problems go up too. So it's like, does it get shifted just to a large part of the population that is doing economically worse? Like that's the balance that I see as being worth being weighed out. Now, in my gut, I would love to just see people getting healthcare regardless of how much money they make. I just would like to see that. Like realistically, though, you have to do that kind of calculation.
Right.
You know?
Right. And I think I that just jogged my memory. I wanted to say something on drugs real quick that you mentioned, like at the top of this thing. My feelings on drug addiction have changed. You mentioned that it's really easy for people to, just kind of say, oh, well, that's their problem. It was their choice.
Their choice. They're a drug addict. They're a piece of shit.
Oops.
Yeah, that's what I hear people say. To be honest, that is kind of how I felt. Just to be brutally honest with you, like that's kind of how I felt. Like, well, don't do drugs and you'll be fine, and then, don't do bad drugs and you'll be fine. And it's just like, dude, like, you made that choice. Yeah, some people came from horrible abuse and they used drug. I'm willing to talk about those people, or I was. Now I'm willing to talk about everybody, because those people who are dealing with stuff with drug addiction are, Joe Rogan has talked about this. The way for a better society for everybody is less losers, right? And that's a blunt way to say it, but if that drug addict who did make that choice to try meth sometime, and now he's hooked and he's lost his job, and if you were to go with the kind of Republican narrative, he's a leech on society, and he's only a drain, and he's a piece of who we don't have any space for, and you can't sleep here. Well, where should I go? I don't care, just not here. Like, right.
Okay, so that I more felt along those lines previously. More recently, I feel like I've learned that those people indirectly will have a effect on my life at some point or another, like in a microcosm maybe, but every one of those losers, in an indelicate term, every one of those losers is like a little bit of weight on the scale of the whole society being every one of those people that we get off that side of the scale and get some help to. And now we can talk about addiction rehab centers and the ridiculously low success rate. Like, that's part of the problem too, right? It's like, well, just expand addiction care. It's like less than, I think it's definitely under 10% of people actually stay clean out of those places.
Yeah.
And in Florida, 60 Minutes has covered this. There's basically farms of people going to the
those are those specific rehab centers, but
right. So I mean, we could talk about that kind of stuff too, but I think that I am fine at this point, even as a small government guy, low taxes guy, wanting to trim the budget. I am fine with even though that drug addict made that choice, maybe, or maybe was a victim of circumstance, but let's just say they made that choice. Okay, I still think that it's better to go ahead and invest the money now, because we're either going to pay it now or later, and I think it's probably cheaper now to treat them sooner rather than later, right? So so just in a pure dollars and cents, that's why I'm against the death penalty now too, because people sit on death row.
That thing is It's also just it's 2020, like we're in the United States and we're executing people. Like, this isn't
right. There have been way too many DNA overturns for me to be comfortable with the government taking lives now. So that was the major reason. But another one before that was more fiscally driven, in that people sit on death row for years and years and nothing happens, and the appeals just eat up money. So there's multiple reasons to be against.
Yeah, but with that drug addiction stuff you're talking about, like that, right? I think that's the appeal. This is an issue I think both and anyone can get behind. Is like fiscally it makes sense. I mean, it also just people who make these claims that people who do drugs and get addicted and have problems are it's totally their fault, only theirs. It just ignores all of the science and all of the discussion and the complexities of addiction and substance abuse. It just ignores the psychological and the physical components, the genetic components of alcoholism, of other kinds of drug addiction, which just seem to be glossed over. Like, I mean, particularly like alcohol. I mean, like I know a bit more about alcoholism. People can be more predisposed to getting addicted to alcohol, and it's such a part of our society that it's like people get upset at them. Like when you see a homeless guy drinking, it's like, okay, that ignores so many things when you just judge him there. It's like his upbringing, his situation currently, and his just genetic makeup. Like he might just be more predisposed to getting addicted to those, and that's something that in some ways is out of his control. And there are things that you can take as an individual to. That's what's really interesting. If you talk to people who are in some kind of rehab like this, it's like this funny duality where like they have to accept that there are things that they cannot do, but they also have to take charge on things that they can do, right? That's like so ignoring this, again, this is a nuanced issue that I think people just like don't know about. Like I talk to people like they're like, oh, just like don't go to bad neighborhoods, like just ignore those like drug addict people, like they'll like it's not your problem. It's like, okay, but that ignores
eventually they're going to be your problem.
Well, and it's just
like,
it's just yeah, exactly. There's that take, and it just ignores the nuance of what's going on in that person's life and the anyone in that kind of situation.
Yeah, I think so one, I want to make a point, and then two, I want to ask you a question. One,
are we going to finish Nick's picks? That's my burning. Oh, that's it.
No, my pick is Mayor Pete, and I don't care what you have to say.
Oh, okay. No.
No, I'm just kidding.
Pete
I would like, Pete Butt.
Buttigieg.
So my point was, oh shoot.
Oh,
well,
sorry,
okay.
Nick. Well, I just wanted to get Nick's picks because I liked saying Nick's picks was mostly what I wanted to keep.
It's a great feature we have going on. We'll continue Nick's pick. We only got through 2 candidates. There's still like 15 in the race. So
no,
next time.
I think it's like 6 at this point. Those 6.
Oh, okay.
That's to me.
All right. Well, we'll do the other 4 next episode. All right. That's.
You see how Bloomberg just jolted in there? Like he wasn't even on the ballot. Christ. He wasn't even on the ballot. Right. It just kills me. I'm just laughing now. He's just like, look, guys, I'm just gonna put my money in here. So anyway. What were you trying to say?
I forget my
Nick?
point.
Okay.
But I was going to ask, do you give money to homeless people that you see?
I have when I have cash on me, I will. I just rarely have cash on me. And I was really
gotcha.
And I think this is largely, I mean, I have this very clear memory of my dad going to the same gas station, would always give this guy all his change. And for some reason he's one of those old like a total dad thing to do that is now what I think it's a dad thing to do is have a bunch of change in your pocket. It's so inconvenient, but so many dads do it. It's crazy. Like I see him at the airport, like pulling out change. It's like, why do you have that? No one needs $3.70 in change. Like, what are you doing? But like my dad always did. And he'd always give it to this homeless guy in San Francisco. And so, I don't know. I do it when I can, gotcha. and I will. I've even done crazier stuff. Like I gave a homeless guy a ride in Gainesville one time because I saw him miss the bus. Like I watched the bus. I saw him trying to get to the bus and he missed it. And I talked, and it's like, okay, people would see this guy if they didn't see the bus leave. They see this guy like trying to bum a ride, like, oh, that guy's creepy, and he was a little creepy. But he had just gotten out of jail. He was talking about his whole life, and it's like, man, like I saw the guy was trying to get on the bus, and like I got to hear his whole little story, and that's probably not the safest, smartest thing to do. But like in that situation, I saw what he was trying to do. He was trying to get on the bus, trying to get where he's going, and he got
oops. Right.
But so I guess I'll do sillier stuff like that. I'll talk to them, and I just think I won't if they have nice shoes on though. If they have too nice of shoes, and like that's probably not the right attitude. I think I've kind of changed my mind. But if they look like so well off, I'm like, oh, you look like, I don't want to say like look crappier, but like I think it. I think it'll help you. I think it'll help you if you just
Yeah, that's
and I don't
branding
think that's the right attitude, because I think like you should try and help people who are like on the border even more, because then it's easier, like lower potential energy to get them back up. But anyway.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
yeah, I do not give money to homeless people, like under any circumstance.
On any circumstance, okay.
Never. I have in the past, but very, very rarely, I would say, like maybe 3 times ever. And my thinking is, and maybe you can correct this, maybe you'll change my mind here, but my thinking is on giving the people just money on the street. I just wonder if that is the most efficient use of your money in particular, or money for that person even, right? Like, you can, so I think everyone, if you said people who are getting out of jail, if you're an addict, you can have $1,000 to go get, to go to a rehab, right? How many of those people are going to spend that $1,000 on drugs, and how many are going to go to the rehab? Like just
right.
a guess, right? Like probably very few. I'm sure some, but probably very few are going to go to the actual rehab. So I get, and see again, the reason I'm leaving the Libertarian Party, I think that there is a role for a big government program that is, or just big government funded program that is somehow, maybe even a faith-based organization could help people more, like I'm even okay with giving government money to churches if you can show me the data that they can get people clean and lead fulfilling lives, like done. Like, you can have as much tax money as you want, like, because I think in the end it will be cheaper for us. So, here's my point that I was going to make. When you were making your point about the homeless people and empathizing with people, I think that's kind of one of your main points this episode.
That's a big takeaway, yeah.
Right, and I think that we should keep this idea kind of just occurred to me, but we should keep in mind that not all people can be persuaded in the same way, right? Like certain people, facts and data are going to be really persuasive, right? Like you. Yeah. I like to think
most people not, though, I'd say, actually, but yeah, I think that's
right.
true.
And so that was my point. Like maybe your method of shipping people, basically, around the United States,
the shipping.
Oh yeah, dude, we don't buy plane tickets. We just buy a bunch of huge FedEx boxes
or big cruise ships. That's actually more efficient. So.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Anyway,
well,
sorry, we're just iterating here. I think I've settled on cruise ships. But then at the same time, people who go on cruise ships, I also think should go away. That's actually Bill Burr's thing. Everyone who goes on cruises regularly
cruise ships are weird.
Just be sunk intermittently to kind of reduce the population. But so sort of, if it's, I think, okay, here we go. We repurpose those people's tickets who bought those. We put them, we say, all right, you guys are idiots and you bought this cruise. You don't get to go on it now because you're so dumb. We're sending these people to help change the lives of everyone. There we go, Nick. We did it. That gets 2 birds stoned at once.
Right. Along those same lines, we run a cruise promo for a year, right? And then we take that money afterward and build a single-payer system because I'm sure there will be enough money.
There you go.
Like we run this promo for a year and then be like, hey, you guys are dumb. You bought tickets to a cruise. All right, that sucks. But you're helping your fellow Americans get healthcare. So that's pretty cool, right? Like, I think the government should get more tricky with people.
Yeah, I was just tricking people.
Right.
Yeah, like anyone who buys a PT Cruiser, you actually have to pay $5,000 more in taxes. I say that, and I know someone very close to me. I know several people close to me bought PT Cruisers, but you still get to pay a penalty. Let's see, what's another? Oh man, there's
maybe they could work it off like
you can work it off like
right instead of a financial thing.
Yeah, I think
right?
there should be like some odder penalties here, like if you get caught driving in the left-hand lane too slowly for a certain amount of time per year, like you have to go volunteer at this homeless shelter. Like you got to pay that time back that you wasted collectively for everyone. Like I think there's some little metrics like that, like like you get a ticket for that, but you have to go and do something for it. I think those
Right.
I think those fun
Driver
kind of
training.
penalties. Driver training, yeah.
Driver
Not-
training, but then they should have somebody walk right in front of them into the building, like really slowly.
Yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
as soon as they try to go around, just like keep blocking
Yeah,
them
yeah,
essentially, and then
yeah.
turn around right as you walk in and be like, "Oops, you." Like,
I think this is fun.
I would have to do that.
Look, that'll promote jobs, increase communication. I think there's something here with these fun kind of tricking people a little bit, a little messed up, but could be fun. I like the cruise ship one the most, though. I know people going.
But how are you going to get people from the east to the west coast and vice versa?
Well,
you have to go around.
Maybe it's a long cruise.
that's
Panama
yeah,
Canal.
I was gonna say.
I don't know, but yeah, okay. It doesn't have to all be cruises, but maybe just Florida to north.
Please.
Well, some of them, selectively, some of them.
just
I think
some
it's the
of
people
them.
who buy
Okay.
the tickets get sunk. That's what I'm saying. The people who buy the tickets should get sunk.
Who
that's
else was on a cruise ship that didn't buy the ticket?
but we were saying also some of those cruise ship tickets are going to be repurposed for sending those people, right? So we don't want to sink those ships when they're going off to their to their enrichment study.
What I'm picturing is we set a date like a year from today. Okay.
But you're talking about the tricking people into buying the tickets.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And we
Yeah,
sell
but
the
there's
tickets for like a year.
Yeah.
It's like a year-long promo because then you can't do like trips during the year. Otherwise, people are going to be like, "Hey, I bought a ticket and I didn't."
Okay.
So like there has to be a lot of build.
So we're talking about two different things. Okay. So like this is
Right.
this is the capital raising part of the
Right. I'm going to pay for healthcare. You're going to make people more empathetic.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
And we're going to solve the United States problems here.
I think that's a great kind of way to end here. I think we ended on a solution. We didn't get through Nick's picks. We ended on a solution.
Well, to be continued.
I think Nick's picks. I think part 2 might have to come about. But I think we ended just like in a good Top Gear episode. We ended with great consumer and great advice for everyone about how to fix a lot of issues.
Right.
So.
When you need solutions, the only place to turn to are Nick and Xander. Analytic endeavors, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Well, you want to close this thing up, Nick?
All right. Once again, if you made it through this one, we must really congratulate you because this was extra rambly, extra long.
But I think we covered a lot of topics.
We did, yeah, and hopefully, seriously, people send us an email if we're jumping around too much. If you have a suggestion for what we should talk about, if you feel like we're wrong on something, analyticendeavors@protonmail.com. You can always email us. That's pretty much it for me. Thanks for listening.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.